right? 6 million people a year die from pollution, 30 million people a year from forest fires, most of which are fully preventable for a wide variety of reasons. Every armed conflict in the world today is the result of state inefficiency, right? All famine today is a result of state
And
inefficiency, right?
protecting the reserve currency, like that's a big
Right,
part of
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
that's
don't
part of it,
trade your
right?
oil with, your own currency or yeah, a lot of it's tied up around that.
Yeah, that's a part of it, right? Whether it's famine, whether it's forcing energy prices up, and 3 to 4 million people a year freeze because energy is expensive, right? Housing being expensive is directly causing people to have less kids. It's one of the main drivers behind this fertility crisis, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we're easily looking at least 1 billion people that are not going to be born because of this inefficiency, and people that
Mm.
are born or preborn, I should say too. We're looking at least at a couple 100 million over the course of the next 20, 40 years are going to die, even if Bitcoin wins. And so,
Because people
at
can't
this
afford
point,
to have kids. So
right,
so
yeah,
yeah.
right, people either don't have kids or they kill their kids before they're born, or the kids are born and they're blown up in some war, right? That is fully preventable. So, my point at this point is that for most Bitcoiners, at this point, my motivation is more so, how do we make the transition the least painful possible, and less so will Bitcoin survive or not, right? Which unfortunately, when I make content about the human perspective, people don't click on it, people don't care, right? I mean, literally the video performs 20 times worse. When I make a video about Bitcoin going up to a certain price point, that's when people care, right? So I mean, I get it, it's just where people's minds are. But I think on the surface level, what attracts most people is that number go up stuff. But if you actually want to have the incentive to make a bunch of money in Bitcoin and work your butt off in Bitcoin, I think quantifying that human cost is extremely significant. If let's say 10 million people are dying a year, they don't have to die. We're assuming a World War III doesn't happen, by the way. If 10 million people a year are dying, they don't have to die over the next 20 years, being the most optimistic we can with Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin can save just 10% of those lives, that's 20 million people, right? Well, there's not 20 million people working in Bitcoin today. Like literally the work we are doing today in Bitcoin is going to save lives, right? Let's say there's 1 million people in Bitcoin, working on Bitcoin full time, which aren't 1 million people, by the way. That's 20 people, right? And I'm not saying it to say, oh, I'm important, I'm saving lives, but that's to say everyone in Bitcoin today, I think, has a very real role. You are one of the 10,000 to 100,000 people accelerating this orange front line, and the work you're going to do today is probably going to save 10 to 20%, hopefully more, of the future lives, born, pre-born, yet to be born, already born. You're going to save probably millions of lives indirectly because of the butterfly effect of the actions you take today. And so, yeah, maybe Bitcoin's inevitable whether you help it out or not. But hey, if you help it out, you might literally accelerate Bitcoin adoption by another 6 hours or another couple days, right? Like literally my work at the Bitcoin Advisor, like I have personally helped overseeing the actions of self-custody for actually a non-trivial number of coins. And it's fun when I always divide the number of coins at exchanges by how many coins I have personally helped oversee get off the exchanges. And it's like, if you get a few thousand people doing what I'm doing, then great, the exchanges have run out, right? So my point is that I think at a certain point for most Bitcoiners, the motivation to work slows down because, oh, Bitcoin's inevitable, I don't need to do anything more. And they're not wrong. And like they probably deserve to slow down, right? I will probably slow at some point because they put in a lot of work. But that motivation for me continues in a large part, not because will Bitcoin succeed, but to what degree and what magnitude is fiat going to cannibalize itself on the way down? If we can turn 200 million deaths into 150 million deaths, then I think that's a huge win. That is preventing a significant portion of the largest humanitarian crisis in human history. And assuming there's 100,000 people working Bitcoin full time, I think it's possibly fair to say that literally you're doing life-saving work in the same way that a doctor might save a few lives a year, or a paramedic might save a few lives a year. Like not only are you working in Bitcoin, doing something that's hopefully fun, doing something that's hopefully making you a good bit of money. But also, ironically, you're probably saving lives or preventing death. Except the difference is that you'll never know who you saved. You'll never know when you saved them. You never know if you actually did. And you may not save a person today. You may save, some kid 55 years from now that you will never meet or never know their name. And so, it's why people don't like thinking that way. They'd rather just have the number go up, price stuff, because, we don't want to think in that more abstract sense. But yeah, just adding on to your point, I think, yeah, I felt like I should say that. And so I think we need to work as if it's as if it's life and death, because it isn't to us, right? We're here in America, or I'm here in America. You're not on the opposite side of the world of me. But to the majority of the world, it's either life and death for them today, or it could be for their kids. So, I think, we have the opportunity to work in Bitcoin. Most people don't, I saw a great post. Sorry, I'm going on a ramble here, but, I think it's also important to mention, like, it is a luxury to save in Bitcoin, right? Like, many people in the world don't have the luxury to save money, right? 80% of the world's adults are making less than $30 a day, right? They don't have the ability to be saving $100 a month, or $1,000 a month, or $10,000 a month to buy Bitcoin, right? Like, the fact that we're having this conversation, we have the free time to talk about Bitcoin. That's a luxury. Like it is a luxury for people in Bitcoin to have the time to watch 10 hours of podcasts and YouTube videos a week, right? And all that to say is that, I'm not trying to force people into doing something out of a negative motivation here, but I am saying that you've got a great responsibility and opportunity here, right? If you have the fortune to be born in a place of the world where you have the time and the energy to sink capital into Bitcoin, into time about learning about Bitcoin and talking about Bitcoin, you are like perfectly poised to make a big impact. I know for me, I felt that way. A lot of it's the work I've done, but a lot of it is that God put me in the right place at the right time. And, I'm not lucky for the work I put in to Bitcoin, but I am lucky that I was born in the right place at time, in the right place and space to be able to capitalize on this. If I was born a couple years earlier or later, or if I was born in a different country, I wouldn't even have 1% of the Bitcoin I have today. All that back to MicroStrategy too is that's why I'm a huge fan of Michael Saylor. I have my disagreements with him. I think many people do, but there is no other human on the planet right now. I don't think Michael's a Christian. I don't know. Maybe he is. I don't think he is. But like objectively, in my opinion, in my worldview, there is no other human being accelerating that route to minimal fiat destruction than Michael Saylor, because he is trying to orange pill the government. And, I think that's a huge win. Like Michael Saylor, literally, I think is saving tens of thousands of lives, if not way, way more, like potentially millions, from the work that he's doing. Except, it's just a couple of decades earlier. Sometimes I say, working in Bitcoin is like fighting World War III 30 years before it happens. It's like I think this is the closest to time travel we get. This is the closest you get. Yeah.
I think it was 9 of the last 11. This is from Ray Dalio's work. Something like 9 of the last 11. Weird his word for it, but when there's a rising power that passes a falling power, there was a violent conflict between the two 9 of the last 11 times, or something like that. And there's the work of the fourth turning, which I seem to bring up a lot in podcasts. Somebody mentioned to me, but if we're able to get through this fourth turning without that violent conflict, the probability of that is very low, from a historical perspective. But I think we've got the best shot at it of any of those times right now because of Bitcoin, and so there's that, the responsibility that we have. And also too, I think like there's a beauty in the fact that it's an emergent property instead of this thing that is being top down oriented, structured. Right. And there's like, I when you were talking, it reminded me of, I was doing some political work a few years back, and I was talking to some people in that arena trying to like kind of sell them on Bitcoin, and they mostly were not receptive to it. And this was like 2021 when I was like, oh my gosh, that's when it hit me. I was like, United States Central Bank is insolvent. Like, we will never pay our debts back. It's like, what does that mean? Where is this going? And I was talking to politicians about it, or people in the political government world, and then it hit me, and I was like, I don't know that they kind of weren't really receptive. And then I was thinking about it one day, and I was like, I don't know that I really want to orange pill these people first exactly. Not that I had any particular disdain towards them, but I was like, I have some friends. They have an account called Bitcoin Indonesia. I lived in Bali last year and met this crew, and they're awesome. And they're doing like great work where it's like, yeah, these are like unbanked people in Bali or across Indonesia or stuff like that. It's like, man, that like those are the people that we should be really trying to get the word out to, because Trump and the government's going to figure it out and that sort of stuff. But I think this, even what we're doing right here, what you do on your channel, this sort of stuff, that's like, yeah, this is available to everybody. I've grown to be more interested in that sort of approach than like, let me get the most powerful person I can on the phone and try to sell them, which, even though that probably would accelerate Bitcoin adoption faster, it's like, yeah, well, yeah, I think this is a better way to go about it, essentially. Last question for you. Go ahead.
In a way, it's like the gospel, right? God doesn't care if you're preaching the gospel to a billionaire or someone in poverty. Like, God doesn't need the money. Like God, Jesus makes that very clear. He doesn't need your money. The meek shall inherit the earth, right? And I think to a lesser degree, it's the same thing with Bitcoin, right? It's like God, if you actually believe God's in charge of the world, it doesn't matter who you're trying to orange pill, right? It's like, do what you can. Probably we are going to have violence. I think we will have a large amount of death in the next 20 years because of fiat shenanigans. I think historically, I think it's very likely. And unfortunately, because the world is so populated now, probably the numbers could be a lot higher than what we expect. I think the big question is just how many. Yeah. Is it going to be a full-out hot war between major economies, or is it going to be this slow bleed proxy war? Because like we're already there, right? Like everyone's so focused on Ukraine, Russia, Israel, and Iran, and whatever. Like everyone's focused on those, but it's like nobody talks about Ethiopia, nobody talks about Burma. People until a few minutes ago weren't really talking about Syria. Like even today there are plenty of people, tens of thousands, 100,000 people every year that are dying, and so even if that were only double, that's still a significant number. So anyway, all I have to say is that I don't think it matters who we're trying to orange pill. I think we should try to help everyone, we can't change the outcome. We can only change our actions, and I got to remind myself of a lot. And that gets back to the whole how do you orange pill your loved ones point, is that you can't change what they do, but you can clear your conscience.
Yeah.